Namaskar and a very warm welcome to this edition of Question Hour Let's Talk Vaccine on Cook Queries. I'm Nidhi Kumar and you're watching India Science. And friends, the emergence of Omicron, a new variant of COVID-19, has become a new reason for worry worldwide. In this program, we take your questions from Facebook and YouTube Live. So today we are joined by Dr. Navneet Kaur, Director, Professor, Department of Surgery, Guru Tegh Bahadur Hospital, Delhi. Many thanks for joining us, ma'am. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Dr. Navneet, how worried should we be? Please tell us about the new variant, that is Omicron, and its symptoms, and what should we, make out of this, as it is a cause of worry worldwide.
I think it has been, yes, flagged as a variant of high risk by the WHO. So we have to be absolutely careful how we conduct ourselves, how we have been conducting ourselves. Again, we have to be more cautious because people were letting their guards down. Things were pretty going back to normal. But we have to be now more careful. Now this new variant has been reported. At the same time, I would say, as has been said by the President Biden, worry. I mean, you don't have to panic. You have to be careful. So, as of now, at the moment, we don't have any reason to be really panicking about another wave or a very serious threat to our health, because this variant so far hasn't been reported to be associated with very severe symptoms. So, most of the cases which have been picked up worldwide, most of them are mild cases, mostly in patients who have already been vaccinated. So, it's not associated with very severe grade disease as much as we know about it so far. But it is highly transmissible. It is being reported practically everywhere from the world now. We have so many countries being added up every day, and it is just a matter of time we pick it up in India also. So probably variant is already here in India. We just have to do the testing, required testing, and confirm its presence. So we, I think, should presume it is already there and take due precautions. And it has been repeatedly said all through the pandemic, both the phases, that we have to follow COVID appropriate behavior. So masking up, social distancing, washing hands, hand hygiene, all these things. I think we stick again more rigidly too, so that we prevent exposure and prevent further spread as far as possible.
Absolutely. As you rightly said, there are mild symptoms that have been detected for this virus and maybe even fatigue. But people are curious to know, doctor, at the same time, how will vaccines work against this Omicron variant? Do the mutations carry a bite in the real world or not? And is it capable of outcompeting Delta?
I think we can only rely on what is the data reported so far. And the data reported doesn't show that the vaccine is ineffective, because all these patients who were picked up with the variant have been either asymptomatic or mild symptoms. And as I already, I think, said, most of them have been vaccinated. So vaccination is going to kind of provide protection. Many companies have put in their statements that this variant is going to be covered by the vaccination. But at the same time, all the labs have started on working on the mutations. So even though the current vaccines have not been completely tested so as to say that they will work 100% or not, but they will provide some protection, as has been said by the experts. And further, the laboratories are now again back in full swing to look at the spike protein, the mutation, and accordingly tailor their vaccines. So we can expect some more kind of vaccines coming in, which will be specifically trying to cover the Omicron with the changes in the spike protein that have been reported. But the existing vaccines will work to an extent if we go by what data we have so far. But again, the pandemic, I mean, this variant has just been reported 2 weeks back, so we still have to see what information is being collected by different countries, and when it is shared, we will have a better picture. It is too, I think, early to really comment on its efficacy, the efficacy of vaccines against Omicron, but picture so far looks stable. It is not nothing to, I would say, panic again.
So the picture so far looks promising, according to Dr. Navneet. Dr. Navneet, how were patients who required surgery for serious illnesses like cancers managed during the two phases of the pandemic so far? And how are you managing now with concerns coming up?
I think COVID has been huge disruptor to the lives of people, as well as at least for surgical fraternity, because surgeries took a backstage, we were mainly dealing with a medical illness, a viral illness, which is not the domain of the surgeons. And surgeries had to be restricted for multiple reasons. First, we did not know how this virus is going to behave in a surgical patient, whether during surgery we do open up, say, body cavities, we deal with a lot of body fluids. So, whether these are going to be the potential contaminants spreading the virus. In the first wave, at least, we have little information. Vaccination was not there. There was a need to kind of infrastructure has always been limited, I would say, facility for us. So to keep these things in reserve for the patients who may require, so our OTs kind of became secondary ICUs. We had to spare the operating equipment, oxygen, anesthetists, ventilators for the patients who may require that. So surgery took a back stage, and definitely surgeries got delayed, even for cancer patients. Even patients were scared. Even they did not want to take a chance because everybody wants to be very safe as far as surgical outcomes are concerned. So since there was so little knowledge and so much of uncertainty, surgeries were deferred as far as possible. So for cancers, we have other alternative methods of treatment which are normally complementary. So a particular cancer will be probably have multiple kind of options to be covered, and all of them are used in the course of treatment. For example, in the case of breast cancer, we do surgery, we do chemotherapy, we do radiation therapy, and there are many targeted therapies which are available. So it is a matter of choice. We can choose and pick up which to give first, which one can be given at the second stage. So patients who would have been otherwise taken up for surgery upfront, they were made to wait till the time we were more clear and protocols of operating theaters, because these are very, I would say, environments with very stringent parameters. So we have to know exactly what is the risk to the patient as well as the healthcare team, because we come in close contact with airway, with body fluids. So all this was being worked out in the first phase. Surgeries were delayed as far as possible. So only emergencies which were life threatening, we treated them as patients who are COVID positive, and we took all precautions. Surgery in a PPE kit and all that is very suffocating. Especially it happened in the started off in summer. So June, July, to work in a PPE kit without a AC is really difficult for a surgeon. In the second wave, we were like vaccinated better. We knew the behavior of the virus better, but then there was an acute shortage of all the required things that we need in a surgical theater. So anesthetists were busy with their duties. Oxygen supply was deficient, without which we can't operate. So in the second wave, though we knew better the virus and its behavior, still we were not able to offer surgeries for a very different reason of infrastructure, not being able to cope up with such a high tide of cases. But all through this, science has developed. We have understood the virus better. We have understood how better to control its transmission. What are the safety protocols that doctors should follow? And also for the patient's benefit, what should be the norms in place? So we have guidelines coming in from different societies as to carry out a safe surgery. So in times to come, I think Omicron so far hasn't shown a very aggressive behavior. So I hope that things will not disrupt as much as in the first and second wave, but we definitely will have to tailor to the need. So based
Absolutely.
on the number of cases, they may require hospitalization even if they're not getting very sick. But then the numbers, if they start coming in big numbers, we will have to spare beds, health personnel, nursing staff. So all that again may reduce the number of surgeries we can do, but hopefully we will not be as limited as in the previous two waves.
That's right. Joining us now is Rashmi from Bhopal. Yes, Rashmi, please ask your question.
Hello. Ma'am, my question is, what treatment options are typically available for breast cancer?
See, breast cancer is a disease which requires multidisciplinary treatment. So I think I just now said that it has to be dealt with surgery, radiation therapy, chemotherapy. These are the three basic components of care. In addition to that, we have a lot of new agents coming in, which we call as targeted therapies. So these are drugs which act on a very specific kind of a target, a specific protein or a specific mutation. So that reduces the systemic toxicity, which happens with the other modalities like chemotherapy. And more drugs are being understood now that we understand genetics much better. So we have multimodal kind of options to treat breast cancer, and in what sequence we use is dependent upon at what stage the patient comes to us. Not just only that, what kind of a preference a patient has, because some patients may be happy to let a breast go. So for them, treatment protocols are different. For patients who may want a conservation because they are particular about body image, then we follow a different protocol. So the sequence of all these drugs, in what manner, in what sequence will give, will be tailored to the patient's expectations and of course the stage of the disease. But these are the broad primary modalities with which we treat breast cancer. And then we may require need a help of specialists for different problems like but basically I would say a surgical oncologist, medical oncologist and a radiation oncologist are the three people who are the primary caregivers for patients of breast cancer.
Yes, doctor, we have a YouTube question now. Are vaccines as effective for breast cancer patients, and should breast cancer patients receive booster doses, according to you?
I think the question was vaccine for breast cancer is not there. It is not developed as yet, so very much research is going on. For breast cancer patients, whether we can give a COVID vaccine, yes. In fact, they should receive because they are the ones who are undergoing treatments and they are vulnerable to more severe disease. So, a breast cancer patient receiving a COVID vaccine is not a contraindication. And regarding booster, I think booster, every country is having their own guidelines. So they have classified individuals at risk. Amongst those come patients like who are elderly with comorbidities, patients who are transplant recipients. So these kind of people who are more vulnerable, they should receive a booster. So, for example, UK has made a booster dose mandatory, optional for all adults. Initially, it was only for 40 plus. They have now kind of recommended it for all adults as a precautionary measure. In India, we still, I think, we are just targeting the at-risk group for a booster. Even for that, a formal announcement is expected anytime soon. It is being actively considered. Uh, but as of now, I think it's more like optional. If somebody is at risk, can get a booster shot if you have had your last dose 6 months back or so.
Yes, doctor. My question now is, how do people who are diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer protect themselves in public spaces? And what is this kind of cancer? Could you please explain this?
Okay, so a metastatic breast cancer is when the cancer is not confined to the breast only and not even to the lymph nodes which are in the armpit. So, as long as the tumor is confined to the breast and the lymph nodes in the armpit, we call it local or locoregional. When we presume it has gone into the system, that is bloodstream, and through the bloodstream to different organs like brain, liver, bones, then we call it metastatic. So metastatic breast cancer can be either picked up on imaging when we see definite lesions are there. Otherwise, if a patient has a very advanced local disease, then also we know that they are metastasis, which we call as micrometastatic. Well, they are not clinically visible, but if we do investigations, we will be able to pick them up in the system. So this is the advanced stage of the disease, and normally for these patients, we start off with a systemic treatment because we now know that it is not a local disease; it has become a systemic disease, so it needs a systemic control first before we think of a local treatment. So these patients will receive systemic treatments like chemotherapy, targeted therapies, and these drugs are toxic, so they have they're heavy on the system. Patients suffer from a lot of side effects. Their immunity also dips. So these patients are vulnerable to infections, and they probably will be the vulnerable group who will be who should be protected against COVID-19 with all due precautions. Precautions, I think, remain the same. That you have to maintain social distancing. Don't go for unnecessary travel. Avoid crowded places. If you want to meet out your friends, meet them in open spaces where there is more less chances of airborne infection. Wear masks. See if you have been adequately, you have received both your doses of vaccine, and if as and when the recommendation about the booster shots come, they should go for that also. Hand hygiene, frequently washing your hands. The things which are recommended for the entire population are true for them also. But they need to know that they are more vulnerable, so they should more strictly adhere to these guidelines. And vaccination is one tool which, and if they have any symptoms, they should report early. They should not wait for things to progress, because in them the disease may progress much faster than those who are immunocompetent individuals. So if you have fever, if you think that you could be having possibly COVID-19 infection, go for early testing, and then the treatment should follow.
Yes, doctor. A common short-term effect of COVID-19 vaccination is also swollen lymph nodes. How long should a woman wait to receive a mammogram after, getting vaccinated? When can she go and take this? And what are the exceptions to this, if any?
I think there would not be any specific guidelines which are available, but if I were to see, mammogram is a procedure which is, especially screening mammograms, these are done once in a year, and for some patients it may be, for healthy people it would be once in 3 years. So if you have taken a vaccine, I think you can wait for 4 weeks safely. By that time, the whatever effect of reactive lymphatitis which is there, because no jab is given in the shoulder, and there also the lymphatic strain into the axilla. So that effect would not last more than 3 to 4 weeks. So after 4 weeks, if you go for mammogram, there is very little chance that your findings will be mixed up, and some erroneous report may come. So that should be, I think, a safe interval.
We have Ashwini from Agra joining us on YouTube, and he's saying, what is your message to PCPs, primary care physicians, during Breast Cancer Awareness Month? What are the issues that they need to be careful about? If you can tell us in detail, how do you actually come to know that you have breast cancer? What are the symptoms?
Okay. So I think primary care physicians have multiple roles. They are useful, they are helpful for the purpose of screening. And for that, they should know what are the symptoms of breast cancer. So I think one of the most important first sign for breast cancer is development of a breast lump. A patient may come to you complaining of a breast lump, but she may or may not actually have, because at times the breast ultimately is a gland. So some kind of a thickening, some normal physiological changes may feel like a lump. Patients by themselves, when they examine, they may say it is a lump when it is actually not there. So as a primary care physician, the symptoms that you know about is that they can present with a breast lump, they can present with nipple discharge. There is a symptom, but very few cases will have pain. They can have some kind of asymmetry of the breast. The nipple may have changes position, it may be retracted. There may be a family history. If somebody has uh, any member from the mother or the father side in the first or second generation relatives who has been treated for breast cancer, they become like higher risk. So physicians should be aware of the common symptoms, that they should be able to do a good breast examination, which is, I think, part of the MBBS training. So anybody who's an MBBS doctor knows how to examine a breast, and if something is further needs a clarification, a lot of material is available on the net. So you can just refer to how to do a good breast examination, so that those who just think they have a lump but actually don't, you can reassure them, because the most important thing is if they feel something that they are worried very much. So we need to reassure those who are not actually having a problem. They should know about when to refer to a physician for opinion. So if they feel something is there, patient has complained of a lump and they are able to palpate a lump, and patient maybe could be having a risk factor, like I said, a family history, or somebody who's a nullipara, she hasn't had a issue, or she has late pregnancy. So there are some risk factors which they should be aware of. So, and then they can refer to the specialist for examination, and then advice for mammogram and ultrasound will happen. And I think we just don't stop short at that. Primary physician also has a big role to play in patients who have been treated and they are in follow. Now that we have so many patients living with after the treatment of breast cancer surviving for long period of time, we have a huge population of breast cancer survivors. And these patients, these people can't always be coming to the specialist for consultation because hospitals have a limited capacity. So in the West, it has become a model of care that people who have been treated under specialist care, they are discharged from the specialist care and they are handed over to the primary care physicians with all the reports. And they are told that these are the basic things that they need to check for the patient, some symptoms that they have to ask, some findings on examination, and some basic testing. So primary care physicians can contribute. In India, we don't have a system as such as yet. Our patients don't have that much of confidence, and we actually haven't rolled out systems so much that we can involve primary care physicians, but that has to happen in next decade or so because we will otherwise not be able to handle the number of cases which are coming up and are going to happen in near future. So primary care physicians should also be there for the supportive care for these patients after the treatment is over. But most importantly, about breast awareness, about telling, even educating people how should they check themselves. So that is an important role any primary care physician and any healthcare worker has to play. Train people to be breast self-aware. If they come to the person with some complaint, to be able to reasonably assess that patient and then refer to the right person. That should be the role of the primary care physician.
Can you tell us about other kinds of treatments for breast cancer? Some other kind of diagnosis?
I think if we talk about the surgical treatment of breast cancer, what I we can tell through this platform to the audience is that we have again made significant advances in how we treat surgically the breast cancer. So earlier on, everybody who would be diagnosed will be required to lose a breast, and I think that would be a treatment which will scar some women for life. Though people kind of readjust their expectations from life and they are fairly okay with the mastectomy scar and life goes on. But with more and more younger people getting affected and with more, I would say, emphasis on good personality and a good appearance, uh, treatments have improved to the sense that we can conserve the breast. We can ensure that body image is preserved. Patient has minimal kind of damage to the area, so breast can be conserved. And even those who have to let go of the breast because the disease is advanced at presentation, they can be offered reconstruction by reasonably good, simple methods and with a very again satisfactory cosmetic outcome. So treatment of breast cancer has advanced to the extent now we call it a chronic disease. We are not thinking of a deadly disease. If once a diagnosis is made, a patient may have limited lifespan. So patients are living much longer like a chronic disease, like cardiovascular, diabetes, and things like that. We have a huge range of products which are available to keep it under check. So patients, even those who come with the disease which has metastatic conductal system, um, even for them, the disease can be kept under control, not actually cured because they already have come to a state when they are beyond cure, but they can still live for extended periods of time with the kind of drugs which are available as of now. Uh, Even the radiation treatment, which used to be having a lot of side effects because the machines were technology was not as advanced. Now we have regimes where treatments which were supposed to be given over 5 week period can be covered in 2 weeks, even 1 week, and even on table. The entire treatment of radiation therapy can be delivered as a single dose on table. So advancement has happened in surgical, radiation, medical, all fields, all trying to decrease the morbidity of the procedure so women can feel as normal as possible and get on with their life as something as a bad experience.
Absolutely. Now we've patched up Amir from Agra. Are you there, Amir? Please join us.
My question is, what is the outlook for the future in terms of surgical planning of cancer patients? Now the threat on another variant is looming large once again.
I think I would say we are better prepared this time. We have herd immunity, we have vaccine. So, in terms of severity of infections, we may not see what we saw during the second wave. So, even if we have another wave of induced by Omicron, it may not be as disastrous as it was last time. In the last 2 waves, we have learned how to better handle the cases who have either recovered or even actively having infection, and those who are not at all infected, but they had to be deferred because uh, resources were limited and kind of occupied or being used for people who are more sick. So governments have done their job. We have more facilities in terms of ventilators, oxygen capacity. I work at GTB Hospital. We had a new facility created of 500 beds where we have ventilators. So we are much better prepared. Their surgeries should not get that delayed as happened in the first and second wave. That is all I can probably say at the moment. And rest is we have to see how things pan out because COVID so far has been very, very, I would say, unpredictable. We thought we will not have a second wave, but we had it and we had to in a magnitude we never imagined. So Omicron so far looks benign. It is not causing severe illness everywhere, anywhere so far, I would say. And it already existing vaccines and herd immunity are going to give some protection. And we have more infrastructure, so that limitation also is taken care of. So I think treatment would go on and with less disruption this time.
Doctor, another question that I wanted to ask you is about chemotherapy. How do you proceed with more, better machines, better infrastructure to be able to cause less pain?
See, chemotherapy it continues to be. Uh, I remember when my patients would come to us, they would think that chemotherapy means some injections, and they would say, "I am really scared of surgery, so maybe please send me for chemotherapy if that can take care of my disease." And we would tell them that even if surgery sounds very scary, it will be least toxic on your system. And after they had completed their treatment, they all said like chemo was like an experience they wouldn't want to undergo again. Surgery was most easily tolerated modality. So chemotherapy drugs will have their toxicity. There are many medicines which are available which can control to a good extent, but and then we have now a lot of newer targeted drugs coming up. So the intent of all this development is to reduce the requirement or dependence on chemotherapy and offer alternative treatments to patients which are less toxic and better tolerated. And I think for chemotherapy, the usual preparation of patient is with a lot of blood testing and ensuring that they have enough reserve in the system to go for the next dose. And it comes with side effects, so adequate counseling is required. Patients should know what all will happen if they lose hair by many drugs, so they can have advanced preparation. So many people store their hair; they use their own hair to make a wig beforehand, so that that loss of hair is not as embarrassing for some people as it could be. So I think information about chemotherapy helps them about getting better prepared to what to expect and how to counter most of the side effects. But it is something which patient will never would say, "Oh, it was something very light and I just sailed through." No, it's a treatment which is going to cause side effects, and patient will have to be brave enough to go through those cycles.
Yes, doctor. Another question that just comes to my mind on a lighter note is how did the surgeons protect themselves while exposure, while doing surgery on patients? And do you see that coming on again now? And what would you like to advise people, because obviously for chemo, they have to come to the hospital. And for that, and for the medical fraternity, they ought to be safe.
Right. I think for surgery, this is one modality which is invasive. So patient has to be, system has to be ready. If somebody is having symptoms of COVID, they should not think of undergoing surgery. At times, patients come and insist. They feel that surgery is being deferred for some light reason. That is not the case. It is really tough on the surgical team because we have to follow, as it is, a surgical environment is very, I would say, difficult for people who are not familiar with. We have protocols of gowning, gloving, wearing this and that. On top of that, we have to wear a PPE. So, and central conditioning has to be off because that is not safe in a theater where a COVID patient is being operated. We come in close contact with the patient, especially our anesthesia team, because they have to put a tube into the airway, which requires closer contact in directly looking into the patient's mouth and upper airway to put in a tube. So they have to be following very strict norms. There are protocols which have been designed especially for patients which deal with COVID cases. So theaters have recommendations regarding from how many air cycles changes to what system of kind of a navigation through the operation area. It is everything is far more, I would say, difficult and improvised to counter the effect of COVID, which could be in the environment. So we do certain surgeries like laparoscopic surgery or endoscopic surgeries where there's a lot of gas which is kind of sent into the patient's abdomen and then into the environment. So we have to ensure that at all these levels, the contamination chances are minimized. So OTs have to be kind of prepared better with local conditioning, with ensuring adequate air changes, with enough filters in the air in the theater so that contamination is minimized. So surgical treatment has to go on, and what has to be done in the theater, guidelines and label, they are being implemented. And doctors have to keep safe. Patients have to understand that if something is not immediately pressing, they can easily wait for the situation to improve before they are planned for surgery. Meanwhile, the alternative treatments which are not as high risk, for example, chemotherapy is few injections. It may be tough on your body, but you have minimal exposure compared to somebody who has to receive a general anesthesia and undergo a surgery. So we will definitely need to prioritize. If the third wave is there, even if mild asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic cases, we will try to prioritize patients who actually need and will deteriorate if surgery is not offered, compared to those who can wait for 2-3 months and then come in for surgery, which will be safer for the operating staff, which will be safer for the patient's point of view also, and it will not hamper the treatment line of treatment and outcome as such.
Absolutely. And with that, in the end, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Navneet Kaur, for joining us today. And with this, friends, this is the wrap of this edition of COVID Live. Do not lower your guard and restart taking all precautions before including, any social kind of distancing in your lives. Vaccination is the best available option at present, and it can be the only game changer. Many thanks for watching. Keep watching India Science. Namaskar.